there, it's Kevin with Rogue Deck Builder here with a top 10 list of cards that I want to brew with from Theros Beyond Death. This is a tradition on this channel to give my top 10 list of cards that I am most excited to brew with. These are not the most powerful cards in the set. These are just my favorite cards that I want to give a go at making a deck with them. So if you're looking for the top 10 most powerful cards, this isn't that video. However, I think that these cards all have brewing potential, and as a brewer, this is the most exciting time in Magic the Gathering, is when a new set comes out with cards to toy around with. So without further ado, let's get started with our top 10. So coming in at number 10, this is actually two cards. You could actually put three cards on this list. This is the Hero of the Pride and the Hero of the Games. There also is an Iroas. It's a red-white card that's an uncommon that has a very similar ability. However, these are the cards I like for Pauper. I think both of them are Pauper playable. There is a go-wide strategy you can go with Hero of the Games, the red version of this with like goblins, or there is the Acroan Hoplite, which ends up throwing out 1/1s every time you target it, so you can make like a mono red heroic, and this is exactly what the deck is missing. So I've combined these two cards. They both say whenever you cast a spell that targets them, creatures you control get +1/+0. The red one is a 3/2, the white one is a 2/2. And so the white one's more powerful, but I do like the red one in that sort of go wide strategy for Pauper. You do have the goblin card that creates 3 goblins that I think is pretty good, and then you can cast a couple spells targeting the Hero of the Games and then easily swing in for lethal. The white one already slots in the heroic strategy that the mono white has with like cartouches. You could also go a few other cards that like raise the alarms that also get out multiple creatures, and then target Hero of the Pride with a couple spells, and you can easily swing in for lethal. So this is Pauper. That's why I chose these two. It is very interesting to try to run an entire deck of these particular cards. We have the Feather that's still in the mix, and so I think like a Feather go wide strategy with Hero of the Pride, or the other 3-drop, the Iroas one that spits out a 1/1 when you target it, plus gives all creatures +1/+0, is a pretty decent strategy in the current meta. We still have cards like Deafening Clarion that can wipe the board. So there's God's willing though, so I think that this strategy does have some legs to it. It's probably what Feather actually wants to become tier again. Alrighty, so let's move on to our number 9. Number 9, we have the Effie Mia, the Cacophony. Probably brutalized that name. However, this is a legendary harpy that definitely takes some work. It's a 2/1 flying for 2 mana. That's pretty decent, actually. At the beginning of your end step, you may exile an enchantment card from your graveyard. If you do, you create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. So there are a lot of enchantments in Theros that do cantrip that you can then sacrifice to scry. There's a black one that's a 1 mana, and I think that they work very well with this particular card. Also, a self-mill strategy with enchantment creatures could make this easily like a Bitter Blossom with an upside. So you're creating 2/2 black zombies every turn as long as you continue to put enchantments in your graveyard. So again, the power level is probably not the greatest for this card. It can have a lot of setup, but that's what I like in cards when I try to brew with them, is cards that aren't just so powerful by themselves, like Questing Beast, for example. You need a little bit of work synergies to actually get their full potential, and this is one of those cards that I think has that particular power level if it gets in the right deck. Alrighty, so let's move on to the number 8. Number 8 is the Helios Sun Crown. This is my honorary Soul Sister edition. I will try this card in Soul Sisters in Modern. I'm not quite sure that it is powerful enough because the slot is very awkward for Soul Sisters. Particularly on this turn 3, you want to be doing something like a Spectral Processions, but Helios Sun Crown being indestructible, it gets very interesting with this card. I probably want to build this in a Sun Hawk version, or not Sun Hawk, the Squadron Hawk version, just to get as much devotion out as possible. Definitely with the Ariak Champion with the 2 devotion, and as soon as you can get Heliod online, you can start you can start attacking in as a beater. But even if it is not online, it's basically to make all of your creatures Agonies Pride Mates, or at least one of them, while it's out, and you can start buffing up the particular creatures. That's why I said Squadron Hawk looks pretty good. You can put the +1s counters on the Hawks, or Legion. The Legion's Landing also, I think, would work very well with Helios Sun's Crown. So very, very interesting card for Soul Sisters. In Standard, it might make Lifelink viable. We do have a Agonies Primate and now the Helios Sun Crown, but the problem is, and we also do get another Soul Sister that actually does work well with this card. It's an uncommon that's 2 white, double white for a 2/2 Soul Sister. The problem with Soul Sisters, though, they've changed how they worded them. Most of the Soul Sisters in Pioneer Forward only trigger off of creatures entering the battlefield under your control. Now, Soul Sisters is an anti-aggro package, and you're relying on that life gain from your opponents. So I think that them dumbing down those cards has made it not that viable for cards like Agonies Primate in Standard. Hopefully we can get a Soul Warden type card in Standard, and then Helios Sun Crown and Agonies Primate definitely will be a 1/2 threat that could actually work in Standard. All right, so let's move on to the number 7. I'm going to stick with the gods here, and we're going to pick Perforos Bronze Blooded. This is 5 mana for a 7/6, and it gets turned on with 5 devotion like all the other gods. Other creatures you control have haste. That is pretty reasonable even for 5 mana. And then the 2 and a red, you may put a red creature card or an artifact card from your hand onto the battlefield. Sacrifice it at the beginning of next end step. So you can actually trigger this on your opponent's end step, and that way that you can get that pseudo haste. There's the dragon right now in Standard. When it attacks, it spreads, 4/3/2 damage or 4/3/3, something like that when it attacks. So if you actually do this at your opponent's end step, it doesn't say you have to play this as a sorcery or anything, then it will come into play, have that pseudo haste, and you'll get some value out of this. Where this card definitely does shine is any sort of red creature card or artifact creature that has enter the battlefield effect, and there also is some good ones already in the format, like the or sacrifice too. Sacrifice is very viable at the moment for cards that get value when they die. But we do have the Meteor Golem, which curves pretty nicely with Perforos. And then if you have any sort of a graveyard reanimation strategy on top of that, but a lot of the cards that work well with Perforos cheating them into play also work really well with then reanimating them. So definitely going to try this in a Rakdos reanimation strategy, as well as possibly in like a Gruul ramp type strategy. On to the number 6. Number 6 is the Archon of Sun's Grace. Now, I think this one's actually a lot better than people are giving it credit for. A 3/4 flying lifelink is pretty good in a kind of like a mid-range or an aggro mirror breaker. And the constellation on this, I think, is also quite good. It's going to spit out a 2/2 white Pegasus creature token with flying, and it will have lifelink. So keep that in mind every enchantment. So if you have any enchantments that cantrip, like I said in Theros, there are quite a few. We already have quite a few in Standard at the moment. You're going to get a lot of value very, very quickly. So definitely liking the Archon of Sun's Grace for that constellation strategy. Looking at white-green at the moment, possibly black-white for that strategy. And I think this is going to be the card that solidifies that strategy. All right, on to the number 5. Number 5 is the Ox of Agonies. Now, you can realize there's a lot of red-white cards, a lot of red-white-black cards. These are the colors I like most out of Theros. If you go back to some of my other top 10s, you'll see a lot more green and occasionally blue. I don't consider myself much of a blue player unless there's a lot of synergy with that blue strategy, not a control player by any means. However, the Ox of Agonies, another red card, is right up my alley. This card seems very, very powerful. I think it's the sleeper of the set. It's also a very good synergistic card, so if you have any sort of deck that fills up your graveyard, the escape is quite powerful with this card. Of course, you're going to be wanting to throw possibilities this in your graveyard and then escape it, and then you refill your hand. So at that point, you just run out everything in your hand, and then so it actually has synergy with the 7/6 dinosaur right now that discards cards at the beginning of your upkeep. Throw possibilities. You could run this in like a Phoenix strategy. I get that it's not an instant or sorcery that works with it, but this is something that then can fill back up your hand after you've blown everything. So it's very good with like Thoughtseize, Duress type strategies. Those get in the graveyard. Then you have something with the escape. Of course, Faithless Looting for Modern would love this if it wasn't banned, but there are plenty of other strategies that can throw this in the graveyard. Pioneer cards like Lightning Axe can easily get this, or Collective Brutality in the graveyard. And then, like I said, if you can fill up your graveyard, this is just a very, very powerful Treasure Cruise type effect for just 2 mana, and you get a 5/3 body on top of that. So Bedlam Reveler is very similar to this. You could see a scenario where you could play both of them. It actually does have some synergy with the Reveler. If you throw it in the graveyard from a Bedlam Reveler, this could actually give you some more value when you escape this one. So you can just continue to get the value out of these Ox of Agonies as long as you can continue to fill up your graveyard. So really liking this card, has a lot of synergy, has a lot of potential, and I think this is the sleeper for the set. All right, so on to my number 4. Number 4 is going to be the Nightmare Shepard. This is a 4/4 flying for 4 mana, and whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may exile it. If you do, you create a token that's a copy of the creature, except as a 1/1. Nightmare in addition to its type. So this card wants to be broken with a lot of enter the battlefield effects. So you're going to get the enter the battlefield effect when the card comes into play, and then when it dies, you're going to get that again. So you got to think of all the cards that actually do. We need like a Ravenous Chupacabra type effect in black. That would be very good. Or like the Duskwatch, Duskwatch Vampire, the one that gives you draws a card. There are plenty of other ETB effects, especially in Sultai colors, that you can definitely make this pretty broken if you can start to get, 2 ETB effects. It almost feels like a Panharmonicon type card. Of course, they do come back as 1/1s. You can't then blink them later on. However, I like the potential of this card, and I'm definitely going to be looking forward to brewing with it. Alrighty, on to my number 3. Number 3 is going to be the Enigmatic Incarnation. There we go. There's our blue and green card all in one here. This one is really, really cool. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice another enchantment. If you do, search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost equal to 1 plus the sacrifice enchantment's converted mana cost. Put that card on the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So it works really good in an enchantment creature deck, but there are many decks or many enchantments that do cantrip, and there is some good ones like Oath of Kaya. Now we're into some pretty crazy color schemes here, but we have like Niv Mizzet to, if we get back to 5-color Niv Mizzet, then if you're sacrificing like Oath of Kaya, then getting a 4-drop. If there's a 4-drop enchantment creature, then it has an ETB effect, then you can sacrifice that to go get another a 5-drop at that point. It just feels like a very fun card to see if you can make it work. Now, it is a bit of a stretch. I am the first one to say that with the Enigmatic Incarnation. However, Niv Mizzet's where I want to brew with it first, because I think that the synergy with that is going to be pretty good. You sacrifice another 4-drop, you can get another Niv, and then if you have other enchantments that you've been able to get with Niv Mizzet, there's a lot of color pairing enchantments that I've been looking at that actually synergize with it. Like I said, Oath of Kaya, that then if you're going into Pioneer, you have like a ton of other ETB effects on enchantments that get value when they come into play, and then you can continue just to get more and more value every turn. So like this card, definitely is a brewer's card, as it's not going to be that easy just to slot in any deck. All right, now we're getting onto the really good stuff, onto the number 2. Number 2 is Kroxa, Titans of Death's Hunger. This is a card that I'm hoping makes a 8-rack type strategy viable in Pioneer. So this is exactly what we're missing in an 8-rack. We need like a finisher, like a very good viable finisher. Davriel is very inconsistent, and so is the 1-drop enchantment. So having Kroxon be able to make your opponent discard a card, and then it will sack itself if it did not escape, and then with exiling only 5 cards from your graveyard, then you get a 6/6, and you'll make your opponent discard another card, and then also potentially lose life if they discard a non-land card. It's just a perfect card, in my opinion, for that deck. So let's read over it. If it enters the battlefield, sacrifice unless it is escaped. And when it enters the battlefield or attacks, each opponent discards a card. Then each opponent who didn't discard a non-land card this way loses 3 life. So on turn number 2, you're probably just going to be casting this. It's going to sack itself. Your opponent's going to discard a card. And then turn 4, hopefully you'll have 5 other cards in your graveyard. You'll be able to escape this, make your opponent discard another card, and then hopefully lose 3 life and have a 6/6 body back. So I might be thinking this card, but it's another renewable resource in like an 8-rack strategy. You're going to be using cards that then make your opponent discard a card. So you're actually going to be filling up your graveyard quite quickly with cards that are making your opponent discard cards. And then this is going to be a renewable resource to make them discard even more cards or have to take care of a 6/6 body. So really, really liking this card. Even does work well in multiples, as you can still cast the next ones and make your opponent discard a card and sacrifice that one to the legendary rule. So yeah, really, really like this card. Think it's going to be the card that if any card will make an 8-rack strategy actually viable in Pioneer. All right, so that leaves my number 1 card, and we'll stick with the most represented color in this top 10 list, and this is Storm Herald in red. This is my favorite card of the set. It's a 3/2 haste for 3 mana, and when Storm Herald enters the battlefield, return any number of aura cards from your graveyard to the battlefield attached to creatures you control. Exile those auras at the beginning of your next end step. If those auras would leave the battlefield, exile them instead of putting them anywhere. So this is a fun deck for a self-mill strategy with auras. You could even run this in like a heroic aura strategy and then have Storm Herald be the card that gets them all back, and then hopefully swings in for lethal. It just gives you a lot of value with those coming back in the battlefield. They don't even have to attach to the Storm Herald. They won't trigger like heroic because because you're not casting a card that attaches to it, but I think this is going to be really good with like double strike enchantments. If I can think of any at the moment, there's an equipment that gives double strike, but I can't think of an enchantment at the moment that does. But if there is any sort of enchantments that give a lot of power and double strike in a self-mill strategy, you could then haste a Storm Herald and potentially swing in for lethal as quick as, I would assume, turn 4, possibly even turn 3, with the right. So thrill of possibilities for a particular. I think in standard it would definitely have to be probably like a turn 4 or something. But in Pioneer and in Modern, I think there's probably a lot of broken things that can be done with Storm Herald. Again, in Modern, this is a card that would have worked out a lot better with cards like Faithless Looting. But I'm even thinking like Burning Inquiry in Modern can help just throw a bunch of enchantments in the graveyard, and then you cast a Storm Herald, get them all back, all the arrows back, and then swing in for lethal on 1 turn. Anyway, that is my top 10 list for cards from Theros Beyond Death. I'm interested in your list. What are the top 10 cards that you are looking forward to brewing with in Theros Beyond Death? I will be trying to make a deck, at least one representation of these cards in decks throughout the format. So we have Pauper, Pioneer, and Standard at least represented here, definitely Modern with the Soul Sisters. And so look forward to those decks and the content surrounding those decks coming out as soon as I'm able to acquire the cards on Arena and MT Joe. If you like this sort of content, be sure to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. And if you want to support this channel even further, definitely come over and check our Patreon out. It is definitely worth your money if you do buy Magic the Gathering products. Links are in the description below. This has been Kevin with the Rogue Deck Builder. Thanks for watching.